So, do we even need a central bank digital currency that would have cross-border payments compatibility, right? And the reason I kind of say this is to really look and kind of pick apart the design choice for an interoperability for a CBDC, right? And so to get into what that kind of means and the drawbacks of that specifically, according to the Office of Science and Technology from the White House, they published a paper on it relatively recently. Interoperability refers to, and I quote, whether and how a CBDC system can communicate, execute transactions, or transfer data with other payment systems, meaning like fiat systems, international systems, like international payments, maybe even other CBDC systems, or digital asset systems. So, like, kind of also could a potential US based CBDC be able to interact with like stablecoins or something like that, right? And so, this at the same time while having users, and those users have like a limited knowledge of like the actual data structures or the other unique characteristics of the other payment systems themselves. So basically, they can use the CBDC and not have to have a full understanding of how that operates with maybe another foreign country CBDC, as an example. They don't have to understand the foreign country's version, just their own, and they can still interact with it, right? And this isn't to be confused with like integration, right? Because when they say integration, they're talking more of like direct access to another system, not just being able to communicate with it, which is more the route of interoperability, right? And so, kind of in for the reasons of this video specifically, we're basically looking at the drawbacks of having a CBDC with this kind of with a lesser degree of interoperability, right? I went over yesterday, it was published yesterday at least, a video going into the benefits of having a less interoperable CBDC, kind of accumulating into having, possibly peer-to-peer transaction potential, right? Is one thing that could come up with having less interoperability for a CBDC. But one of the problems with that is it could also have less optionality for consumers, right? Maybe even foreign consumers, or domestic consumers interacting with foreign financial entities in some way, right? Basically meaning they can't interact with foreign financial systems with the CBDC system because it can't communicate with it, like how we were talking about when defining interoperability, right? And so this could mean that a CBDC related cross-border payments process, whatever you want to call it, wouldn't be possible because it couldn't. The U.S.-based CBDC could not interact with that their foreign payment system, right? Whatever country it happens to be, and this could hurt like remittance payments and that sort of things, as an example, right? It also could mean that you couldn't use your CBDC while you were traveling, right? If this is to come to fruition, right? But on the other hand, I mean, you could still use your commercial bank deposits and everything that we have now. At least that's the assumption, because according to these papers and stuff from the White House, which of course will be linked in the description, so you guys can read those as well if you wish. That, and I always feel I have to cite everything like that. You should do that if you're going to use information, but that's completely separate topic. But anyway, it seems to be the general consensus from all the entities talking about the CBDC related developments or design choices, that sort of thing, is basically it's just going to be a parallel system, and it's not supposed to be kind of symbolic of a destruction of the traditional financial or commercial banking system. There is talk of disintermediation, that sort of thing, if a CBDC system is to come to fruition, which is why I've already done 3 videos so far on the intermediation topic, which can be found in the US CBDC Design Choices playlist, and a few other, and I think another playlist I have on my channel going over the different is a series of papers from the BIS, and it was a collaboration with the world's central banks, basically, like the Fed, the Bank of Japan, Bank of Canada, Swiss National Bank, that sort of thing, right? So that's there as well. But to get back on topic, right? And so another drawback really with having a less interoperable CBDC would be less domestic optionality, which doesn't necessarily just mean for kind of domestic individuals being able to interact with foreign countries, right? It could also mean maybe there's other structures or systems that we have here to where they can't use their CBDC for certain goods or services. Maybe it's not really compatible or can't communicate with like a domestic payment system, because it's one of those you have to realize, especially like if they just kind of throw this out there, it's kind of like a beta version, and it's probably not going to work all too well. And like there'll be pilot testing and that sort of thing, kind of like, I guess cough cough FedNow sort of thing. And I've already done a video on how FedNow is not a CBDC, right? It could be thought of as like kind of the infrastructure for one, but it's not, because it fulfills a lot of the benefits and selling points that are given in arguments for a CBDC. FedNow kind of takes care of that, right? And there's other things going on as well, like some commercial banks doing pilot programs and that sort of thing. Not the topic of this video, future stuff. But regardless, to continue on, so in terms of domestic optionality, right, there'll be less of it, and it would also be more difficult to possibly transfer your CBDC into fiat, right? This is kind of what we mean by going between systems, because it's not necessarily just foreign countries and their systems. It could even be like the domestic commercial banking system to a certain degree, right? Because it's not like all of this is obviously it's not set in stone. The paper that is in the description, and then basically kind of using to garner a argument for and against, and really trying to understand each little different design choice that we could have, because it seems like this is actually being pushed for. And so I think it's important that we actually understand the possibilities, and so we can kind of position ourselves in the best possible way that we can. And there goes my train of thought. There I go for going on a short little rant. But anyways, to continue, so another kind of disadvantage with this, or a drawback of having a less interoperable CBDC, right, would be it may not have enhanced privacy protection, which is something that we went on, and especially in the intermediation topics, to where you'd have kind of the private sector innovation come in to a certain degree, and obviously a lot of that's kind of in flux. Again, it depends on all of the design choices. The purpose of these videos specifically are kind of to individually pick out and talk about pros and cons and so on of each design choice that could happen. Just kind of put the discussion out there. It's not really saying like this is the best, this is the worst, just kind of just trying to understand it, because it really depends on it depends on the aggregate total of the design choices, right? And after we're done with all of going over each design choice individually, it's really going to be, okay, here's a case study of like the most basic version, maybe one that's supposed to be, and then a more complex version that's meant for more privacy protection, and another one for I think cross-border payments and that sort of thing is in the future, to just kind of show that we're laying the base groundwork, right, to try to understand this stuff. That being said, to continue on with the topic, fewer entities might be allowed to innovate, meaning like, again, the cross-border payments, and there won't be an incentive for them to do so if they're even able to, right? Because again, that really depends on, like who has access to data and that sort of thing. And we'll get into that specifically and more in depth when we start talking about privacy, and security and that kind of thing as well, right? And again, as always, and I think it goes without saying, with the concentration of power, especially when you start to take intermediaries out, whether that be through interoperability or whatever, that's less basically people who have at least a little bit of authority to some degree within the system. And so whatever is left, basically they have all the options and all the power. And so that's something you have to really keep in mind. And I guess to kind of conclude, especially with the purpose of these videos, I'm trying to kind of keep my personal opinions out of it for the most part, at least in the beginning. And I kind of just drop them at the ends and really try to kind of formulate it. And that's why I'm trying to understand like every little aspect of this as much as possible, to really formulate a, I guess, articulate and coherent opinion, as I think a person should do for basically any argument in general, to really try to be able to articulate it in a coherent way, especially. Anyways, not to get too ahead of myself, or not ahead of myself, but not to stray too far or any more from the topic of the video again. But that being said, excuse me, I'll put a card up in the corner for the video going over the benefits, like I alluded to in the beginning of this video, the benefits of a CBDC with less interoperability, right? So that'll be up in the corner. And just so you guys know, I'm basically just going through these papers, and I want to get the information straight from the horse's mouth. So like the Fed, BIS, the White House, that sort of thing, to really understand, their point of view as well. Not just, like what we kind of formulate on our own as just kind of citizens in a way. And that being said, really trying to understand, their point of view, where they're going with this and that sort of thing. Because you really have, if they're the ones making the decisions, then it's kind of like you want to understand their point of view, at least, I think, more than possibly even your own. But anyways, that's all in the pipeline and so on. But anyways, if you enjoyed these kind of more deep divey kind of videos, especially with CBDCs, these are kind of really what I'm trying to push for now and focus on and understand, is to really niche down and understand like every little thing I can about these things, right? So if you guys enjoy those, don't forget to subscribe and put your comments and stuff in the comment section below, obviously. I'd love to hear you guys' feedback and possibly even your thoughts about this stuff as well, because that's kind of the whole point of actually making videos and putting them out there, is to kind of provoke that discussion. Anyways, great job in English. But anyways, I hope I'll see you guys next.